Engines roar like thunder over the Atlantic night. Fire streaks the sky, and the ground trembles as a weapon born of war rises toward the edge of space. Scientists once sworn to Hitler now draft blueprints in workshops thousands of miles away, while soldiers stand ready to unleash missiles that can erase a city before a siren sounds. Children gaze upward at bright test launches, unaware that the same flame that promises the moon can deliver nuclear annihilation. What began as a desperate Nazi experiment now beats at the core of American ambition, where every launch carries both the thrill of discovery and the shadow of instant destruction. Welcome to Season 1 of TimeGhost Cold War coverage in our series War to War, where we cover the events of the decade after World War II that brought man from the brink of destruction to the threshold of the stars. I am Sebastian Brandstetter. After World War I, fascination with rocketry takes hold of Germany. Thinkers like Hermann Oberth, a Romanian Austro-Hungarian German physicist, published bold visions of space travel, inspiring public imagination. In 1927, enthusiasts found the Verein für Raumschifffahrt, VFR, Society for Space Travel, to experiment with rockets. Interest surges in 1928 when showmen Max Valier and Fritz von Opel staged rocket-powered car demonstrations that thrill the media and youth alike. Among those captivated is a teenager named Wernher von Braun. At 16, he infamously straps fireworks to a toy wagon and launches it down a Berlin street, drawing police reprimands but cementing his resolve to pursue rocketry. By 1930, while studying in college, von Braun joins the VFR at their test field on an abandoned Berlin ammunition dump. Under Rudolf Nebel, a famous World War I German pilot's guidance, he moves from student observer to active participant, calculating fuel mixtures, refining nozzles, and charming visitors with his enthusiasm. The work is crude, but formative. Amid blowtorches and trial-and-error launches, von Braun learns to design and fire liquid-fueled rockets. By 1931, the Society propels small rockets skywards for only a few hundred meters, impressive bursts of creativity held back by shoestring budgets. As the Depression dries up private support, the German army takes interest. The Versailles Treaty bans heavy weapons, but not rockets, which effectively opens a loophole that permits long-range striking power in lieu of bombers. In 1932, Captain Walter Dornberger visits the VFR site, spotting promise in the young von Braun. He offers army funding, and at 20, von Braun leaves the Raketenflugplatz for the Kummersdorf Proving Ground. Years later, spoiler, he defends his choice of the military-industrial conflicts, noting that in 1932 the Nazis were not yet in power and that to him and his peers it seems a patriotic, practical path rather than a political one. This is where Wernher von Braun's path from youthful rocketeer to weapons engineer begins. With army funding for his doctorate, he conducts early missile experiments. By 1937, he leads Peenemünde, the world's first large rocket research center, and is told to join the Nazi party to protect his career. Focused on propulsion, he advanced from failed tests to the A4 missile, which in 1942 became the first human-made object to reach space and was soon renamed the V2. As Germany's war fortunes waned, von Braun, now SS Sturmbannführer, faces mounting pressure from Nazi leaders to mass-produce the weapon. Production shifts to the Mittelwerk tunnels, where thousands of concentration camp prisoners endure starvation, disease, and death. From September 1944 onwards, over 3,000 V2s rain down on Allied cities. Propelled to never-before-seen heights, the V2 plummets down at supersonic speeds, meaning that there is no warning, no noise, nothing, until the explosion of a 1-ton warhead rips apart streets, squares, buildings, and people. 9,000 civilians die without ever seeing the attacker. But they are not the only ones paying the ultimate price. In the zeal to turn the tide of war, the V2 production site or production line near the concentration camp Mittelbau-Dora consumes more than 10,000 lives as well. Yet, all for naught, as no weapon the world has seen thus far is capable of handing Hitler the victory over almost the entire world he so desperately craves. With Germany collapsing, von Braun is briefly arrested by the SS and then flees west in April 1945 with key engineers and documents. He surrenders to US forces on May 2nd, seeing the US as his chance to pursue both military rocketry and his dream of space exploration. He knows he has a strong bargaining position, given his unique expertise in a field where Germany is decades ahead of the rest of the world. Well, that, and there are also top secret documents he has stashed away by accomplices in a mine in Bavaria. His gambit succeeds, not that it was really a gambit in the first place. The US is very much keen on getting their hands on anything V2 related by this point, including von Braun. They jest that our Germans are better than their Germans, reflecting Washington's confidence that under US direction, its ex-Nazi rocket experts will outpace those working for the Soviets. But who are their Germans? Well, as the war ends, German rocket technology is the prize in a new international scramble. Von Braun and his Peenemünde colleagues become coveted assets for the victorious allies. The Soviet Union had its eyes on them. Stalin's agents have a list of key German engineers, and von Braun's name has been known to Soviet intelligence since the 1930s. The British also desire top German experts for their own research. Indeed, even as von Braun waits under American custody in May 1945, the British Army organized Operation Backfire, a plan to have German crews test fire a few V2s for British study. Dornberger and some staff are temporarily lent to the British for backfire static tests, but von Braun is deemed too valuable and remains under strict US supervision. The American military and intelligence leaders realize that whoever harnesses this German missile expertise will gain a critical edge in the post-war world. So they begin a concerted American effort to acquire German rockets, technical documents, and the brains behind them, laying the groundwork for what will become the US Cold War missile program. This effort coalesces in Operation Paperclip, the covert operation to bring German scientists and engineers to America. If you want to know more about it, check out our episodes regarding Paperclip on Spies and Ties on the World War II channel, or even our episode about the Soviet counterpart, Operation Oso-Aviachim. To summarize, overall some 1,600 German scientists and engineers will come to the US under Operation Paperclip. Upon arrival in America, the German rocket team settles at Fort Bliss, Texas, with testing operations at the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico. Starting in 1946, under the guidance of US Army Ordnance, they reassemble and test fire captured V2 rockets on American soil. These launches serve a dual purpose. First, to give American technicians hands-on experience with ballistic missiles, and second, they allow scientific experiments at high altitudes, showcasing the V2's potential for upper atmosphere research. Von Braun, however, has even grander ambitions from the outset. As one historian notes, May 3rd, 1945, the day after von Braun's surrender, marks day one of his American rocketry career, and he naively expects the United States to jump on the bandwagon of full-scale rocket development for new strategic aims. Von Braun hopes the US will build upon the V2, possibly against the emergent Soviet threat, and ultimately for voyages to the moon. But reality does set in slowly. The immediate post-war environment in America is one of rapid demobilization and of tightening budgets. The German specialists find themselves in a nation exhausted by war and initially hesitant to invest heavily in new weapons. Frankly, we are disappointed with what we find in this country in the first year or so, von Braun admits later, recalling that at Peenemünde they were lavishly funded, whereas in America, 1945-1946, everybody wants military expenditures curtailed. Facilities at White Sands are rudimentary at first, little more than wooden workshops and makeshift launch pads, a far cry from the extensive infrastructure the Germans knew. Moreover, the Germans' legal status as foreign nationals under secret contract also imposes constraints. The Germans are allowed no access to American classified projects and are not permitted to leave their designated area without a military escort. Isolated at Fort Bliss and barred from independent travel or outside collaboration, von Braun's group initially toils in relative obscurity. Despite these challenges, the US rocket program in the late 1940s steadily gains traction. American military research branches into many experimental missile projects, often parallel to von Braun's effort. The Army, Navy, and newly independent Air Force all sponsor rocket initiatives at government laboratories, universities, and private companies. For example, the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C. begins developing the Viking suborbital research rocket to surpass the V2's performance, and the Army's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California works on the Corporal Tactical Missile and smaller rockets. In this environment of pluralistic experimentation and inter-service rivalry, knowledge from the German V2 designs quickly disseminates across the American engineering community. Within 3 or 4 years of war's end, US rocket technology absorbs and surpasses what Germany has achieved. American engineers introduce innovations that the Germans did not pursue during the war, such as gimbaled rocket engines for improved steering or lighter, load-bearing fuel tanks integral to the rocket structure. Initially, most missile ventures remain experimental due to budget constraints, as I already said, and also the absence of immediate threats. But, as you know, tensions with the Soviet Union are on the rise, and in turn, the strategic rationale for more advanced missiles becomes undeniable. By 1950, the Cold War is in full swing, and US strategic priorities have shifted decisively. The Soviet Union's first atomic bomb test in 1949 and the outbreak of the Korean War in 1950 underscored a need for absolute American technological superiority. If you want to know more about either the Korean War or the Soviet journey to the bomb, check out the Korean War channel or our episode about the Soviet bomb right here on TimeGhost. The US Army sees particular value in developing ballistic missiles capable of delivering nuclear payloads, already having discussed the application with von Braun as early as 1946. In 1950, Army leaders relocate von Braun's team from Fort Bliss to Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama, signaling a transition from V2 testing to the creation of new American weapons. The Army's Ordnance Guided Missile Center, OGMC, at Redstone Arsenal is charged with developing a more advanced surface-to-surface missile to meet US defense needs. A team led by von Braun, now integrated as Army civilian engineers, begins designing what becomes the Redstone missile, named after the arsenal and the region's red soil. Redstone becomes the first major US-built ballistic missile derived from German expertise. In essence, it is a direct descendant of the V2, effectively a super V2 in its design and capabilities. However, it is not simply a copy. American engineers update and improve the weapon. To further expedite development, the Huntsville team incorporates an engine based on a design from the Navajo cruise missile program built by North American Aviation's Rocketdyne division. This engine, designated Rocketdyne A7, uses the same propellant as the V2, liquid oxygen and ethanol, but produces about 78,000 pounds of thrust, substantially more power than the German version. The V2's airframe is lengthened and constructed with an aluminum fuselage featuring integral fuel tanks. The V2's propellant tanks were non-structural bladders hung inside the frame. Redstone also adopts an all-inertial guidance system developed by Ford. Yes, the car company, but not through its motor division, but its subsidiary, the Ford Instrument Company, replacing the older gyroscopic guidance of the German V2. These innovations give Redstone greater range, accuracy, and reliability than its wartime predecessor. By April 1952, the Army formally christens the weapon Redstone, and that year the Chrysler Corporation, another car company, is selected as the prime contractor to mass produce the missile. Building a new missile from scratch requires close collaboration between the German-born experts and a growing contingent of American engineers and industrial partners. In the early 1950s, von Braun's team's members sometimes lament the shortage of experienced US engineers willing to relocate to a small, humid Alabama town, yet their project moves ahead under Army oversight. The Redstone missile program enjoys high priority and is insulated from the worst of the budget cuts that hit other defense projects in the Eisenhower years. Major General Tolstoy, who becomes commander of the Redstone arsenal in 1954, and later Major General John Medaris, ensures strong army support for von Braun's group. Meanwhile, the US Air Force pursues its own path with long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles, while the Navy develops ship and submarine-launched counterparts. Inter-service rivalry sometimes puts the Army's rocket effort under political pressure, but in these early years, the Army retains control of the short-range, under 200 miles or 322 kilometers, ballistic missile project, which Redstone is designed to fill. After several years of design and construction, Redstone is ready for flight tests. The first prototype, Redstone RS-1, launches from Cape Canaveral on August 20th, 1953. It rises from the pad successfully, but then suffers an engine failure about 80 seconds into flight, tumbling into the Atlantic. After this partial setback, engineers go back to the drawing board and refine the design. For instance, fixing a turboprop cavitation problem that causes fuel starvation. A second test flight on January 27, 1954 proceeds without issues, achieving the intended range and marking the program's first full success. Over the next few years, Redstone test launches continue at Cape Canaveral and White Sands, gradually improving the missile's performance. Von Braun's conservative engineering approach, honed since the V2 era, proves its worth as Redstone matures into a reliable weapon system. By mid-1955, the Army is confident enough to begin training operational troops on the system, even as refinements continue. Throughout this period, US political and military leaders keep a close eye on international developments in rocketry. Intelligence indicates that the Soviet Union, which has taken its own share of German rockets experts, is making rapid strides. Meanwhile, the Redstone missile itself enters service as an operational weapon. In June 1958, after a series of test flights, the Army will declare Redstone operational as the nation's first ballistic missile and will send missile units to West Germany. So, the American military, together with German scientists, builds a ballistic missile more advanced than the V2 in less than 15 years. This achievement is unquestionably built on the foundations of Nazi wartime innovation, yet it is realized through American initiative, resources, and strategic direction. Now, the Redstone program shows how thoroughly the United States makes Germany's rocket legacy its own, combining German technical input with American leadership to serve US ambitions. However, weaving the German rocket team into the American military research structure is not without friction. There is a reason the presence of the SS Sturmbannführer von Braun and other Nazi scientists is kept secret. When the press eventually learns of it, the news creates public outcry. Some American scientists and Jewish organizations decry the government's decision to give refuge and employment to men who served the Nazi regime. In response, the US officials quietly sanitized the records of certain recruits, omitting or downplaying party and SS affiliations to ensure their indispensable skills can be utilized. Von Braun's own wartime past is brushed aside as he begins his new life in America. His compromises with the Nazis safely swept under the rug, as one biographer puts it. In the end, Cold War realpolitik triumphs. The value of German rocket expertise to US security outweighs any moral scruples. The creation and deployment of the Redstone missile take place within a broader context of US strategic and institutional mobilization. The early Cold War transforms rockets from experimental curiosities into vital elements of national security. Under Army ordnance auspices, Redstone becomes the linchpin of the Army's contribution to America's emerging missile arsenal. The project's success also feeds into inter-service debates over control of missile programs. That is why, in late 1956, US President Eisenhower's administration, concerned about duplication, ensures that the varying branches cooperate rather than compete. That policy effectively makes Redstone the zenith of von Braun's Army work. What began mere decades ago as a teenager's firecracker wagon has turned into a deadly sentinel of American interest, capable of delivering payloads hundreds of miles away. The journey from the V2 to Redstone compresses the work of a generation of German scientists into barely a dozen years. The United States lays its hand on one of the enemy's most fearsome weapons, claims it as its own, strips it for secrets, and fuses that hard-won knowledge with its own industrial muscle. The result is no mere copy but a transformation. Lighter airframes, roaring rocket-dyne engines, and precise inertial guidance turn the Redstone into something wholly new and far more deadly. What once terrorized London becomes both a shield and a warning. We can strike you from far away. But at least now, compared to World War II, there will be a warning. 3 minutes or so. Enough time to hug your loved ones and grab a beer. Although preparations are already well underway to make missiles even more deadly. Nuclear warheads are planned for Redstone to be completed in 1958, and other larger and more capable missiles carrying ever larger payloads are also in development. For the moment, anyone 320 miles or so from a US missile base is safe. That will change soon. Maybe even intercontinental strikes could move from the realm of fiction to reality. By mastering the V2's grim inheritance and bending it to national purpose, the United States vaults from the ruins of war to the brink of the unimaginable, proving that the frontier of space and the shadow of annihilation are born of the same flame. The Redstone stands as the emblem of that paradox, triumph and terror, promise and peril, a sleek monument to the double edge of human ingenuity and technological progress. If you want to know how rocket technology further develops, more about the deadly competition this technology will ignite between East and West, and whether humanity truly will reach for the stars, then stick with us here on War2War on the TimeGhost channel. If you like what we do and want to become a part of it, head to timeghost.tv or patreon.com to enlist in the TimeGhost army. Excelsior!